Hello, I want to welcome everyone to the Power of Our Story. And today, we are really happy to welcome Rich Oakley. He just has an incredible story. He's a retired law enforcement officer. He's also was also a DEA agent. And there's just a lot to tell in his story, in really some hard times, and then the way he was able to overcome. So anybody who's watching this, I want to invite you, if you're a first responder or if you're a veteran or a caring bridge builder, please come. If you'd like to be part of this conversation, we warmly welcome you. You can reach us at our website, thepowerofourstory.com. I'll also have in the description our email, all our contact information. You can go on LinkedIn and DM us on The Power of Our Story, or my name, Sara Correll. And with that, we're going to go and have Rich share his story, and then we're going to open it up for conversation. So Rich, it's so wonderful to have you. Thank you for coming and sharing your story.
My story actually begins with I was 13 years old when I lost my dad. My dad was a World War II Navy veteran, and he after he got out of the Navy in 1946, he had an injury in the Navy, and I don't know if that had anything to do with, well, it probably did. But anyway, my dad he got out of the Navy, and he was with a few buddies of his, and they were basically drinking all the time, drinking cheap wine and stuff like that. And my dad died from cirrhosis of the liver. And I was 13. I remember the school principal had me and my sister and brother sent to the office, and they said that somebody's going to come and pick you guys up and take you home. You know, we didn't know why, but we left, and when the intent was to take us to the hospital so that we could see my dad before he passed. Well, when we got home, the phone rang, and the hospital said it was too late. My dad had already passed. So I went outside, and I was sitting on the back porch, and my mom came out, and we were talking, and I said, "Mom, you don't ever have to worry about me drinking, ever." And years later, I would go on to regret that promise I made to my mom, because I never kept it. I never kept it. So fortunately for me, I had a couple of police officers in the town that I grew up in, New Jersey, Ray Falls, Charlie Hill, and Tommy Stabile, and John Langenbach, four of them actually. And they befriended me, and they knew about my dad, and so they would give me rides home from school and stuff like that. So my impression of law enforcement was formed from them, in the way that they treated me, and it was funny because when I went into law enforcement, uh, when the family found out, one of my dad's sisters, one of my aunts, said to me, "I would rather see you be a garbage man." And I was like, wow. And I realized that when I got on the job, the perception that I had of law enforcement was not what everybody else had out there, you know. And I realized what she meant by, "I'd rather see you be a garbage man." And so anyway, so I went to the academy. It was in Seagirt, New Jersey. It was on a military base, and it was a live-in academy. I graduated in November of '67. Went to the police department, and the first night there was 6 of us that were hired and went to the academy together. But the first night we reported to duty after the academy, I had a lieutenant, His name was Conway. I grew to love him. But he said to us, he said, "Gentlemen, you're closer to jail tonight than you've ever been in your life." And I'm saying, wow, I thought we were here to, you know, lock up people doing bad things. But he said, "You guys are closer to jail than you've ever been in your life." And he said, "There's three things that are going to do that: booze, bucks, and broads." That's just how he put it out to us, right? I was like, wow. So uh, that was my my introduction. Then I was in patrol, and one of the narcotics sergeants one day asked me to come over to a local bar, and he had four people that he wanted me to see because they were notorious for robberies and stuff like that. So he wanted me to make sure. He said, "If you ever see these people, make sure you stop them and find out what they're doing." Now, back then, if you were convicted of narcotics, you had to carry a narcotics registration card. So um, I'm sorry, June 14th, 1968, I had worked the um, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift. I got off at 2 p.m. and I got home. I took off my uniform blouse and uh, all I had on was my uniform pants, a white t-shirt, and my boots. I left my gun home and I was going out to one of the local stores to pick up something. As I'm driving out of my apartment complex, I noticed three of the people that the uh, sergeant in the narcotics squad had pointed out to me. So I pulled over to the side of the curb where they were standing, and I got out of my car. I had a '65 Mustang. I walked over to them and I said, "What are you doing here?" And I asked them for their cards, and two of them pulled weapons on me. They forced me to get in the back seat of my car. One of them took the driver's seat, one got in the passenger seat, and another was in the rear with me. And we started driving. And they took a this was in New Brunswick, New Jersey. So we went into Trenton, Princeton, Trenton, and then we drove in. Eventually, we wound up in New York City. But during the whole trip, they were talking about killing me. When they turned on the radio in the car, and that's when I learned that they had just held up a shoe store in town for $486, which in today's money would have been like almost $4,500 that they got in that robbery. Um, I had a nightstick in the car, and they hit me with it a couple of times on my arm and stuff. But the whole trip, they were talking about killing me and stuff like that. And I told them I had a couple of young sons at home. I'd like to see them grow up and stuff like that. And one of the three was sympathetic. He kept saying, "Let's just dump them somewhere. Let's just dump them somewhere." And then one of them said, "Well, we crossed the state line now. They could get us for the Lindbergh law." Right. So all this is going on. So anyway, they drive up to West End and 72nd Street, and they jump out of the car and leave me there. Um, I sat there numb for a while. I didn't know what to do. So I drove back to my hometown and went to my sergeant's home and told him what happened. And so he asked me, he said, "Where was your weapon?" I said, "Home." He says, "Do you realize that there's a departmental rule that if you don't have your weapon, you could lose your job?" And I was a probationary police officer at the time. So I was like, oh wow. Uh, so eventually we a couple of days later we went to New York and went to the Midtown North precinct and met up with some detectives that were going to help us look for these people. And these New York detectives were phenomenal. I mean, they called in informants, and I mean, it always amazed me how somebody could run to New York with all those people, and these guys would pick them out of pick them out of the crowd in no time. And they actually, they a few days they had them. It was unbelievable. So they extradited them back to New Jersey, and we had grand jury uh, process. This was my first experience in any kind of court in my whole life. So I walked in the grand jury room and I see all these strange people, and then the prosecutor starts asking questions, and then eventually it leads up to the trial. The day of the trial, it was a 4-day trial. I walk in the courtroom, and again, you got all these people, and uh, took the witness stand, and it was then that I realized what I was up against. The 3 defense attorneys um, were going to cross-examine me, and one of them was really brutal. Uh, I had to uh, uh, let it be known that I didn't. I first said I had my weapon, and then this one attorney kept saying, "Well, if you had your weapon, why didn't you shoot?" And I said, "Well, there's a crowd of people." But anyway, finally they got out of me that I didn't have my weapon. So the the jury goes out. The judge gives them their what do you call it? The instructions. They go off to the jury room. They're out about 6 hours. They come back. We, the jury, find the 3 defendants not guilty. I was destroyed. I was destroyed. I left there. I left the courtroom. I went to a local bar where police officers usually hang out, and I started drinking. And they told me to take vacation, so I took a couple of weeks off, and just because I was no good at work. I was no good at work. Um, I was doing an off-duty job in a supermarket, and one citizen walked in and said, "They should have fired you," just like that. Eventually, a group of police officers from the department and some people from the county that knew me got together, and they threw a dinner for me at a restaurant, just a support for me, which was very nice. Um, so 1972, I lived through all of that. I left the department and I joined the Union County Prosecutors Office because uh, Union County had came down to the office and asked for me to work undercover for them because they had no black investigators. So I asked them, I said, "Well, how much you guys make?" They said 10,000. I was making $5,000 at the time, a year, in 1968. So uh, they said 10,000. I said, "Well, do you need anybody?" They said, "Sure." So after I went down and I did undercover job for them, it took, let's see, I forget, about a month I worked for them. And then I asked for a leave of absence and I joined them. And for the 2 years I worked with them, I did undercover exclusively with no backup. I was out on the street at night with no backup. I had a detective from the Elizabeth Police Department who I would meet at the end of the night. I would turn over my drugs. I would give him a description of the people that I had purchased from. I had like matchbook covers with little notes on them and stuff in my pockets, and so I left there. Well, DEA had come down to Union County Prosecutor's Office and said, "Hey, we have a couple of big jobs that we need an undercover agent for, but we don't have any black agents. Could you loan us Rich Oakley?" But we heard about that he does a lot of undercover work. And they asked me, and I said, sure. So I went down, and I think I worked for DEA for about 3 months. It was a fairly nice case. And one of the agents said to me, he said, hey, we're looking for guys with your background. Why don't you take this application? And I said, I'm happy where I am. But I took it, I filled it out, I sent it in, and um, probably a year later, I get a letter that they want me to come to New York City for an interview, which I went to. And so then I got hired. I went to the academy in DC. Part of it was over in Quantico at the Marine Corps base. Um, get on the job. I was a training coordinator, and well, I started out in New York City. I worked there for about 2 years, and then they shipped me over to Newark, New Jersey. Um, I did some basic investigations, and then I became the training coordinator for DEA, first one ever in the state of New Jersey. And I went around to all the local police departments, police academies, and we set up 2-week training courses in narcotics. My class of instructions were undercover, informant development, and surveillance. So after that, the office got a notification that there was a spike in heroin, and Newark was considered one of the hot spots. So the special agent in charge had a meeting one day, and he said, "Listen, you guys need to do something about this. Get out there and beat the bushes and see what you can do." So I had an informant, a really good informant, and I called him up, and we got together, and he took me to meet a guy at a tavern in Newark called Wolf's Tavern. I never forget. I walked in, I met the guy. He introduced me to him. I met him, and the guy, and I said, "I'm looking to get some heroin. I heard you guys got some pretty good stuff." "I don't know what you're talking about, man. I don't know what you're talking about." Okay. So we're in the men's room talking. I forgot. "I don't know what you're talking about." So, okay. So I pulled out this wad of money that I had, and I said, "You know what? If you don't want it, somebody else will." And I walked out. He comes running out behind me. "Oh, hey, man, come on back in there. Let's talk." So that's when I made my first purchase from these people. We found out that these guys were doing $40,000 a day in heroin sales. 40,000. Incredible. The organization was really well set up, well protected. But eventually there was some heat on me. So my backup team was Newark Narcotics Squad members that I worked with. They knew me like a book. They would say, if Rich goes into this place and if the people are late, he's not going to wait. He said only cops will wait. If he'll give them 5 or 10 minutes and he's out. And that's exactly what I would do, So gee, I shouldn't have sidetracked on that one, but so the heat was on me. So the Newark Narcotics Squad, the sergeant said, "Hey, we got a plan. So today, when you're in the area with your undercover car, we're going to have a couple of marked units come down, pull you over, and arrest you." So I said, "Okay." So I'm in the area, and all of a sudden I see these two marked cars come, and they pull me over. But they made one mistake. And the mistake was they took me out, searched me, handcuffed me, put me in the back of the police car. But then one of the guys, the officers that was riding in the other car, got in my undercover car and drove it. Now, normally that car would have been towed by a tow truck company, right? So the guy that I was dealing with was standing there watching all of this. So the guy that normally brought me the all the heroin got in a car and followed the police car with me in it. He followed them and watched them drop me off at the federal building in Newark. And he went back and he told the guy that Willie Bennett was the guy that ran the organization. And he said, Willie, that guy that we're dealing with is a Fed. And he says, what are we going to do? And Willie said to him, we have to kill him. So this kid, his name was Michael Owens. They called him Little Man. He went and got a 22 revolver for a bag. He traded a bag of dope for that weapon. He got a piece of cardboard and he went down to this park and he was practicing with the weapon. So a few days after that incident, I was scheduled to make another purchase from him. So I go back to the bar. I meet him. I make my purchase, and I get in. He says to me as I'm leaving, listen, if you come back at 5 o'clock, we're getting a new shipment of heroin in, and we'll give you a free sample. I said, sure. Run back to the office. I secure the purchase. I get in the car. I brief my backup team. This is what's going on. I go back to the tavern. He gets in the car with me. Now the informant was with me, but he said, "Can you leave him here? I don't like 2-on-1." I said, okay. So I'm saying, no big deal, right? He gets in this. He's sitting next to me in the passenger seat. I'm driving. He's giving me directions of where to go. As we're driving, he's asking me, how was that heroin that I delivered at McDonald's? Or how was that heroin that I delivered over here, or whatever, right? I realized that he's trying to confirm. I later found out that he was trying to make sure I was the right guy. So I knew I had a problem, but I didn't know what the problem was. I said, can't be robbery because I don't have any money. It's a free sample, right? So as we're driving, I'm watching my backup team in my mirror. We're riding up Frelinghuysen Avenue in Newark, if anyone is familiar with that area. And there's a park, Weequahic Park. And he says, make a left here. So I make a left into the park, and there's like a cul-de-sac. He says, park here. He says, I'll be right back. He gets out of my car, goes down in an embankment, and he comes back, and I notice his hands are dirty. And he says, come with me. I get out of the car, and I said, what's going on, man? You got people here? No, it's down here. So he goes down the embankment. He thinks I'm right behind him. I stopped at the top of the embankment. He turns, and in the sunlight, I see the sun glitter off of the 22 weapon. It was a stainless steel. He fired the first shot. It went past my ear. The second round misfired. I had no weapon, so I started to run, and I was running in a zigzag pattern. He's running after me, firing his weapon. I get down to the end of the road, and there's a black gentleman, older, sitting on his car, on the hood of his car, and he says, "Are they shooting at you?" I said, "Yes." Get in my car. So I got it. I jumped in his car, and he's reaching over the back seat, and I grabbed his arm. He said, "What's the matter?" I thought I went from the frying pan into the fire. He said, "I want to give you some water." So he gave me some water, and he said, "Where do you want to go?" And I told him to take me to the precinct. Now, when we went into the park, my backup team knew that if they came in, they would have been exposed. So they stayed out. Later on, we found out that they said they heard noise, but they thought it was firecrackers. There were people in the park, and when they heard the shooting, you could see people just getting in their vehicles and just take off. So anyway, we finally was able to get a hold of the office, and everybody came over to where I was, and I briefed them as to what happened. We started the manhunt for the guy, and we found him in an apartment complex. He was on the phone with his girlfriend, and he said, "They're at the door. I'm going to leave the phone off the hook. If they shoot me," he says, "I'm not armed, so if they shoot me, you know that they murdered me." So when we get in the door, we see that, and one of the guys that I was with walked over and just ripped the phone line out of the wall, and so they handcuffed him and took him in, and I went out and I was standing on the curb, and I was crying, because I I I was just crying, and one of the guys came over to me and just gave me a hug, and went back to headquarters. And then finally, it comes trial time, and the I used to see Judge Whipple. Uh, the judges used to come to the federal building because we had a cafeteria in the basement, and I used to see Judge Whipple every during lunch, and he'd say, "Agent, I'm going to throw the book at that guy." And so we go to court, but Judge Whipple told me he didn't want me in the courtroom during sentencing, so I didn't understand that. But anyway, so I stayed in his chambers, and he came in and he said, "I just sentenced him to 10 years in prison." Now, back then in 1980, there was only a federal charge, assault on a federal agent. He could have punched me and it would have been the same charge, right? Assault on the federal, and it carried a maximum of 10 years. So he goes off, and he in during the sentencing, he said, "Can I go to Danbury?" The judge said, I have nothing to do with that." Well, he winds up in Danbury. So while he's in Danbury, the prison psychiatrist calls our office and talks to the special agent in charge and said, "Hey, this guy, every time I talk to him, he has one desire. He says when he gets out, he's going to finish it." He said, "I just want to let you know." And but after the shooting, I was going through these what they call startled reflex, I guess. I'd see somebody that looks similar to him, and I would get nervous. I had nightmares, some really crazy nightmares. Uh, Drinking. I had a buddy that owned a liquor store, and I would call him if I knew I was going to be working past, say, 9 o'clock at night. I would call him. I would say, "Hey, Joe, can you do me a favor?" He said, "What do you want?" And I said, "The Johnny Walker that I usually get." He said, "Okay, it'll be out behind the garbage can." He would take the bottle and put it behind the garbage can. I would drive there on the way home, pick it up, go home, drink, and pass out. Um, and whenever I wanted it, it was always there for me. And then I would go in and pay him for it. Um, so this drinking just kept on and on and on. I became a functional alcoholic. I could go to work, I could pass out, I could go to work the next day and function. And then, that night or whatever, whenever I had free time, I was drinking. Um, so again, there was nothing at that time. DEA had nothing in place. Um, the very next day, the very next morning, when I got to the office, they sent me on an undercover mission because somebody said, "We don't want him to freeze up." So they sent me right back out undercover again. Um, in 1985, DEA decided that they were going to form what they call the trauma team. Each division was supposed to select an agent to be part of this. It was a peer selection process. So the agents in my office selected me. We go to Philadelphia for the meeting to iron out how this thing is going to work and so forth. And the purpose of the program was to have us be able to go to on-scene shooting events and take care of the families and other personnel that might have been affected by that shooting. But during the training, one of the instructors was Harvey Goldstein. He's a friend of mine on Facebook. We would watch movies, part of the training. One of them was To Live and Die in L.A. And that movie that's another good one, because you don't watch the whole movie. They just pick out excerpts to show you what trauma does to people, you know. And this guy To Live and Die in L.A. He eventually just started. He had a female informant that he was having relationships with, and that caused him to go down the drain. But the other movie that we watched was The Onion Field. And so when the lights came on, Harvey looked over at me and he said, "Rich, what's wrong?" I was crying. I was just crying. And I said, "This reminds me of something that happened to me." And he said, "What?" And I told them that story. And he said to me, "Can we have dinner tonight?" And I said, "Sure." So after class, I went and had dinner with Harvey. And he said, "Rich, you're very depressed, man." I said, "Harvey, no, I'm fine." He said, "No, you're really depressed." And I said, "No, Harvey, I'm fine." He said, "No." He said, "You've learned to integrate that into your personality." He said, "You're just living with it, but you need help." So we get the trauma team gets set up, and one of the questions they asked, they said, "Well, if somebody's involved in a shooting, do you think they need to be seen after that shooting?" And we said, "Yeah, absolutely." And one of the lead the person that was leading the meeting said, "Well, how can we do this? Because you guys aren't going to. We know you guys aren't going to want to go and into counseling." And so I raised my hand, and they called on me, and I said, "Well, why don't you make it mandatory?" I said, "Because you're right. If you say, 'Rich Oakley, you need to go see a clinician,' well," I said, "my peers are going to think Rich is weak. There's something wrong with him. We may not be able to trust him. Uh, he may not have our back." I said, "But if you make it mandatory and you say, 'Rich, you have to go to counseling,' and somebody says, 'Rich, I heard you're going.'" "Yeah." I said, "If I don't go, it's mandatory. I'm going to lose my job." And so they were surprised that we came up with that. And so they made that the counseling portion mandatory. So after that, I wound up in San Francisco for 4.5 years. Again, during that time, nothing was done. I get transferred back to headquarters in 1991, and they had headquarters had human resources had two clinicians. One, Gail Davidoff, I'll never forget her. I love her. She came in from Philadelphia, 6 o'clock in the morning, 3 times a week, and I met with her at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I sat there, and I was telling her a story about my dad and everything else, and the kidnapping and the shooting incident, and losing my younger brother and stuff. And she said to me, she said, "You've had an awful lot of losses at a very young age." And she said, there's a book that I want you to go pick up. It's called Necessary Losses. And I picked that up, and it was helpful. And she said to me, um, at the end of the session, she said, Rich Oakley, you're a good man. And I lost it. And she said, what happened? I said, I haven't heard that in so many years. You know, I thought I was worthless. So anyway, um, prior to that counseling, um, the drinking was really getting a hold of me. I would sit at the kitchen table and listen to music and start crying. And this is before my daughters were born. And and I knew, no, actually, my daughters were young. I'm sorry. Um, I got up, I went and got in my car, and I drove to a location. And I said, this is it. I got to do it. I got to do it. But then I thought about my mother and my family members, and I said, what's it going to do to them? And I said, I can't do it. So I went back home, and, and um, one night I'm sitting, I'm sort of jumping around a little bit. I'm sorry, guys, but uh, one night in Newark, it's just before the Christmas holidays, and we're sitting around in the office, a few of us, and one of the guys, we were talking about drinking of all things. So one of the guys said, "Hey, Rich, if a doctor told you you had to quit drinking, would you?" I said, "No, I'd rather die." And he like said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I'd rather die than quit." So a few days after when the Christmas holidays were over, one of the guys that was in that meeting, and well, not meeting, but he said, "Can we have coffee?" So we did. We went to a local coffee shop, and he said, Rich, you touched me the other night. He said, because I have a drinking problem. And he said, and for you to let out, uh, expose yourself like that to the group, help me. And he said, I just want to know, will you be my sponsor? He said, I want to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I said, absolutely. And there was one other guy in the group who was the Newark sergeant that was part of my backup team. He was also had a drinking problem, which he said I helped him with. I had a secretary in San Francisco. Her name was Christine, and she was sweet, 25 years old. She would sometimes go missing in action, right? She would call the office at 6 o'clock in the morning and talk to one of the secretaries that was there and said, tell the boss I won't be in today, but I'll call him later and let him know. Well, she would never call. So one week she's out for like 3 days in a row. Again, 6 o'clock in the morning phone call, but she never would call me later. I said, I took one of the agents in my group. I said, listen, we're going to go to Christine's apartment and see what's going on. So we go there, and as I'm walking up to the building, there's this woman who we found out was the manager. And I said, she identified herself as the manager. I said, can you tell me where Christine, what her apartment number is? And she said, sure. And so she told me, and we go up there. I knocked on the door, and I said, Christine, It's Rich. I want to talk to you. She said, boss, I'll call you later. I'll call you later. I said, no, Christine, we need to talk. We need to talk today. The superintendent gave us an empty apartment, and Christine came down to the apartment, uh, and we started talking. And I said, Christine, you have a problem. I know what the problem is, but I want you to tell me what what it is. And she said, I have a drinking problem. She said, I lost one of my brothers to alcohol. So I said, well, Chris, we're going to get you, I want to get you into Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm not going to go. I'm not going to go. She said, I'll go if you go with me. I said, oh, absolutely. So I went with her. Um, then I get notified that I'm going to be transferred from San Francisco to Arlington, Virginia, to our headquarters. The incoming supervisor I met with, and I said, listen, you got to do me a favor. Christine needs support. She needs help. And you got to do me a favor and make sure that she continues to go to these meetings. Well, he dropped the ball. I get a call at headquarters. Rich, Christine killed herself. I was like, wow. So her dad, I think they lived in Chicago. Her dad sent me a card and he said, I never met you, but my daughter told me so much about you. And so anyway, that was, I felt kind of guilty because, you know, I said if I was there, she probably wouldn't have done that. Then my first partner in DEA in Newark, Chuck Franklin, captain of the Marine Corps, 2 tours in Vietnam. Um, he took his own life. While I was in San Francisco, uh, they called me and told me. And what had happened, Chuck was going through a divorce, and his lawyer called him one morning and said that um, your wife's going to get like 70% of your retirement. And he said, well, how do you expect me to live? You know, I think he had 2 kids. So he was doing a course of instruction that week, street survival. Chuck was a tough guy. I mean, I just I love the guy. He's going undercover one night under some organized crime guys, and I said, Chuck, you forgot to give me the bus signal because I was headed to surveillance, right? He said, if you see my hands around that MF's throat, then you know there's a problem. So I said, okay. So, but he was teaching cops how to handle themselves on the street. So when he got the news that morning, he was in his hotel room, uh, and he took the gun and he shot himself in the heart. And I believe he did that because he wanted to be able to have an open casket funeral. The one of the maids walks in the room. She knocks, room service. She walks in. She sees him sitting at the table, and she backs up and she leaves. She comes back about a half hour, 45 minutes later. He's still there. She gets the manager. They go in and they find out that he was dead. Um, and that was tough. That was really tough. But see, he looked out for me because I had a supervisor who never worked undercover in his life, but every time I went undercover, and we had the briefing, Rich, when you get out there, this is what I want you to do. This is what I want you to say. And so I would walk out of the out of the meeting to go to the undercover job, and Chuck would grab me and he said, you need to get your head clear. He said, you can't be going out there thinking about all this crap. He said, whenever he's going to do it, we know he's going to do it. Just go along with it. Say, great idea. I love it. And that's what I started doing. So we come back for the debrief. Rich, did you do it at boss? Thank you. It worked perfect. And so that was it. So anyway, after that, I started to I made a life. I said to myself, I have to help. I have to let people know that it's okay. It's okay to say you're not okay. You know, and it took me a long time. I met clinicians who had no clue what I was talking about, what I was dealing with. And it was hard to find somebody that actually could relate to what we were doing, what I was going through, the alcohol and all the other crap. You don't realize, people don't realize, unless you're military, first responders, and stuff like that, even nurses, and you don't realize the trauma you're getting yourself in when you take on these jobs. I worked homicide when I was in the police department, and yeah, just the fact of going to autopsies and murder scenes and all that stuff, you don't realize that all of that stuff is impacting you, you know. But anyway, I'm glad I had an opportunity to tell you guys, tell my story, and I love I love Sarah. Thank you, Sarah.
Oh my gosh, Rich. So much you've gone through. And I just want to thank you for trusting us. Thank you for trusting us to come on. You started your career, is it 67? Is that when you started?
Yes, 1967.
So I think about this. You said for decades, you never shared your story. And then last night was pretty much the first time that you shared.
Mm-hmm.
And then today.
Mm-hmm.
How did it feel? How did it feel to share your story in front of others?
You know, last night and tonight, I'm sorry, today, uh, I could feel, um, I felt safe. I really felt safe, and it felt good for me to be able to tell, the things that I went through, because I realized that that session that we had in the office one night, just sitting around, how that little part of me talking about my um, alcoholism touched two people, and they wanted help, and so yeah, I I had a teacher, Miss Matthews. After my dad died, I just went off the rails. I started not doing homework and anything, or everything. She kept me after school one night, and she started talking about the potential she saw in me, and she's crying, I'm crying, and I used to go back and see her every year and give her a hug, and I told her, I said, you made me the man I am today, because she put me back on track, and I'll never forget that. And anytime I see teachers, I tell them that story about what she did for me, and yeah.
It's amazing the angels that we have in our life, isn't it? I'm so glad that you're here today to share your story and how much, oh my gosh, you have lost so
Yeah.
much. You've gone through so much in a time where there was not a lot of understanding and support.
No.
And you made it. You got into recovery. You were able to help other people through your story. You were willing to share it. And then, to bring you here today to help other people that are suffering in silence. And I think about all those years that you have carried so much, and it's really an honor to have you here. It's an honor to hear your story. I see it as very sacred. And so I just want to thank you before we open it up to comments and questions. I just want to thank you so much, Rich. You are a hero. Thank
Thank
you.
you, Sarah.
So would anybody else like to have a question or a comment? Jim.
Yeah, Rich, thanks for sharing your story. You mentioned that your children didn't know about your story, and one of them stumbled across something, newspaper, that kind of thing. I had this sort of the same experience where I shielded my family from my story for the whole time. Matter of fact, my wife was a public safety dispatcher, and it wasn't until, and we've been married for 34 years, worked together, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until last 6 months or so that we actually had an experience where we went to a movie, a presentation about PTSD, and we came home and sat on the couch and actually told each other kind of what baggage we were hiding from each other.
Right.
But I had the opportunity to tell my story in a video format for another program, and I was able to take that and share that video with my kids. My kids are now in their 30s, right? And my son was the one that came to me and said, "Dad, I had no idea. I understand now why you were the way you were," that type of thing. So there may be value in taking this recording and sharing it with your family, or that type of thing.
Yeah.
I remember that night, Jim. I remember you were going to that 911 trauma. Is that do you remember what it was called? Because it's good for other people to know about it too.
The movie, I think, is PTSD 911.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And I remember you were telling me that you and your wife were going to it, and then you shared afterward, about how that really opened up a conversation between you and your wife. Yeah, I think that's great information. Does anybody else? Patrick.
Thank you, brother. I just want to tell you, I have so much love and appreciation for you and the wisdom that you bring. And I wish more of our young guys going into this business could hear your story and hear about you're so humble and kind in your presentation. And despite your tough guy story, your kindness shows through. And I appreciate that about you. And I wish that some of our younger guys could hear you share and learn from you, because I was a tough guy and I didn't listen when people told me it's going to be a tough road and a lot of tough things, and you won't always deal with it well because, I was too tough for that. It wasn't going to affect me. And so I think people like you, it's important for them to hear that. And we're losing that wisdom and that age of knowledge from the people before us, especially as things in this country deteriorate. So I'm really grateful for you sharing it, but I'm also grateful for the opportunity for Sara to replay it back for other people, because I'm going to share that link quite a bit with people. So much love and respect.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm grateful too. Yeah. Thank you, Rich. Well, listen, before anybody else has a comment, I don't see any hands right now. Can you share that one little part about your story? The man, when the guy was shooting at you, and the man that just happened to show up and was sitting on his car and you hopped in.
Yeah.
Can you finish the rest of that little story? I remember you sharing about that. That was incredible.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah. So we found out he was a local minister, and he said the night before, he said, the Lord kept telling me, go to Weequahic Park. He said, I had no idea why. And he said, Lord, if that's what you want, I'll be there. And so, and that was, once I heard that, and it came out. In fact, the special agent in charge invited him to our office with his two children, and we gave him a certificate of appreciation, a nice program, and took photographs. I have pictures of the event and all. But yeah, he said he was just sitting home and he was troubled, and he went there and he said, "I'm here." He said, "Lord, I'm here for whatever you want." And then here comes Rich Oakley down the road. Are they shooting at you? Yeah, get in my car. And yeah, wow.
That's incredible. That's oh my gosh, you have so many stories, Rich. That's amazing. That is amazing. Oh my goodness. Catherine.
Thank you, Sarah, for asking. I was going to ask for you to round out that story and explain a little bit more who that man was.
Yeah.
But that's truly remarkable. I feel like that would make a believer out of anybody.
Yeah.
That happened. That's unbelievable. But I don't have a question or anything. I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story, because your story had a lot, and it's a incredible story. And I just really appreciate you coming on today and sharing it with us. It was really an honor to listen to.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Catherine. And then Paul.
Thank you. Rich, I am blessed to know you and to hear your story for perhaps the third time now. This one in certainly much more detail because there was more time available. But I'm most grateful that you're alive, because having been through a similar circumstance, not quite as dramatic as yours, but nevertheless for the same violation of being armed off duty, I came close. I've had 9 close calls in my life, and I'm not pushing for the next one.
Right.
But the thing that touches me the most is the authenticity with which you tell that story. And that can only come from experience. You can't learn that in a script writing class. Mm-hmm. It just does not work that way. And it's sort of like the academy. The academy allows you at graduation to go out and learn. Mm-hmm. And most people think, well, I've graduated, now I'm a cop. Well, yeah, you're still a wannabe, pal. I was an FTO for a lot of guys, and some didn't make it. But I enjoy hearing aspects of your stories, and other parts of it just give me the shivers. And I appreciate that you're willing to go through the emotional trauma that gives rise to and continue to tell your story. And I thank you for that very much. And I wish God's blessing on you.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Love you, brother.
I, by the way, put in a call to a guy named Joe last night and left a message for him. I think he's out of the country. I'm not sure, but perhaps I'll find out today. But in any event, I will send you an email this afternoon.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Sarah, another thing I found out, I used to have, like, every once in a while some agents would say to me, and even people that weren't on the job, "Are you still running in Weequahic Park?" And that really hurt, you know. And so one therapist said to me, you know what they're saying? They're not trying to make light of what happened to you. They're saying, "I'm glad it wasn't me."
Wow. What was the term? What was the term that you just said? What did they say to you? I didn't catch the term.
Oh, "Are you still running in Weequahic Park?"
Can you explain that? Because I'm not understanding. I'm
When
sorry.
when the guy tried to kill me in the park, I wasn't armed, so I was running, and he was running after me, shooting the gun. And that's what the guy at the end of the road, "Are they shooting at you?" So they would say to me, "Are you still running in Weequahic Park?"
Okay.
And that would hurt.
Mm.
But this therapist said to me, they're not belittling you. They're just saying, I'm glad it wasn't me." I mean,
They're giving you your street cred, and it's joking with you. Like,
yeah,
you could pick a better place to go for a run, man.
yeah, yeah.
So as you say that, I think about the times I've joked with friends in a similar manner, and I hope it was never hurtful, because it never is. It's always from a place
Right.
of profound love and respect. But you know that those that we, in this job especially, that we joke with and crucify and roast the most are the
Oh,
ones
yeah.
who we have the most respect for. So I just want to reassure you, maybe that's not a good place to go for a run, brother. So
Probably so raw that it kind of landed hard, or
Yeah.
yeah, I could imagine. Oh,
what happened with the guy who shot at you? You said he was in prison. He was determined to come out and finish the job. Clearly you won that battle, but where's he at and what happened?
Oh, so I'm in San Francisco, and he had asked when he got released, he wanted to go to New Jersey, back to New Jersey. And they called me and they said, "Hey, Rich, Michael's getting out, but we're not sending him to New Jersey where he wants to go. We're sending him to Richmond, Virginia." And I laughed, and they said, "What's funny?" I said, "Well, in a couple of weeks, I'm going to be in Arlington, Virginia, visiting." I said, "No, that's going to be my new duty station." And I said, "Oh, that's like 4.5 hours away." I said, "Yeah, but what the heck?"
Sounds like Alaska would have been an appropriate place to discharge him.
Yeah, right.
I could think of some.
And I told the people on the phone, I said, "You know what? With his propensity for violence," I said, "he's not going to last long in Richmond, Virginia. You know, somebody will do him in."
do you know what happened? Did he just, I mean, obviously his plan failed, which we're all grateful for.
Yeah. And the prison psychiatrist said he was a hero in Danbury. He said once he told the story about trying to kill a DEA agent, he was a hero. He said the guy was actually a hero in prison, you know.
Well, Rich,
It tells you about the rehabilitation programs in the prison system. They are all but useless.
Yes.
And, we see people come out of prison here in California, and you've been here, so you know.
Mhm.
And they go right back to the neighborhood where
Yep.
they got in trouble, and right back to the surround themselves with the people they got in trouble with. And I mean, it's just unbelievable that, that nothing changed the entire time they were there.
No.
And I can tell you a brief story about a guy who was put in prison for a very long time for attempting to kill his wife, stabbed her 41 times in the presence of their children.
Oh.
And
Wow.
she almost bled out. And I was involved in that case. And so the DA in Torrance wanted to know if I would come down and be on the video call for his parole hearing. And I said, the only way I would do that is if he can't see me. Because I had enough grief in my life already. I didn't need to be somebody else's hero. And so we went down there and listened. And the president of the parole board was an older Black man who was just above beyond being conned by anybody. He'd heard every story known to man. And this guy starts spinning his tail. The president says, "Excuse me, we haven't asked you a question." And then he says, "How much education have you gotten? How many, have you gotten a degree or your high school diploma or anything?" The guy says, "No." And he said, "Have you learned a trade?" And he said, "Only dishwashing." And he said, "No, that's not learning a trade. That's your job here." You know, and so it just went downhill really fast from there. And this guy threatened to come after me because every time they sent a letter to me saying he's going to go before the parole board, "Do you have anything to add?" And my response was a one-sentence letter. It said, "Everything that I know about this case is contained in the report." And it was a pretty thick report. And so we moved, and we moved again, and we came to a place where the likelihood of him even figuring out where we live, much less getting to it, is almost nil. And I still get letters, and this is almost 40 years later.
Wow.
So, but yeah, I think when you said that, it just reminded me that the rehab system is just broken.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's sad because some of those people deserve a chance and they deserve the opportunity, but they're not getting
No.
at all. And so here we have people that, get 3 squares in a bunk, and that's about the existence of their life for the most part.
Mhm. Yeah.
We
So,
needed Anthony Powers. He's a wonderful man that came on, who was in prison at around age 16, and just really turned things around and turned the prison around, and is doing great work now. But listen, thank you so much for Paul. We're going to have to end out now with Catherine's comment or question.
Yes, just very quickly. Also, I agree. The guy who killed my cousin in the 90s, he was on death row and got a retrial, and now he's in general population and he is a hero in prison. But what I wanted to say was just thank you again, because your story is just such a reminder for me as like a civilian of what you guys, and Patrick, you touched on this. It's just a reminder of what our cops and first responders really do experience and go through. And we as civilians have no idea of what these people who live next door to us are experiencing on a regular basis. And yeah, I just wanted to say that, and thank you again.
Thank you, Catherine.
Well, Catherine said much more beautifully than I would have everything that I wanted to say. Thank you so much, Catherine, for that. It was so heartfelt, and it does just really remind us of the sacrifice of our protectors. And I want to thank you so much, Rich. Thank you so much for all of your comments too. Do you want to share any last thoughts before we say goodbye?
I would just like to thank everybody that was on the call today, and your feedback and comments really meant a lot to me. I also have I was telling Sara earlier, I have a Facebook group that I organized, I think back in 2018. It's called Friends Who Honor Law Enforcement, Military, and First Responders. And I'd welcome anybody to come and join that group. It's a safe place. I have there's a few questions if you join you have to answer, one of which is no politics. Is it's a safe place. We don't get politics in there at all. And yeah, so
I will
but
put that in the description. I'll make sure that that's in there for people to be able to
oh,
find.
okay. And Sara, once again, I don't know how this all came about with you and I, but I'm glad it happened.
Me too.
I think I always say things happen for a reason. I've been trying to local police academy here. I asked somebody, I said, I'd like to come up there sometime, just talk to the recruits about what it was like when I was a police officer in the 60s. We had no vests. In fact, we didn't even have walkie-talkies. We had call boxes. A horn would ring, you take your key, go over, pick up the phone and find out what they wanted. But nobody seems to be interested, and it's Teresa Carpenter. She's a friend of mine on LinkedIn.
Love her.
Yeah. But yeah, this is a great group, and I'm glad I found Sara. I'm glad I found the group, and I love all you guys. I really do.
Oh, well, the feeling is mutual, Rich. It's been an honor, I think, for all of us to be able to really hear your story, honor your story. Really appreciate you, and I'm so grateful that you're with us on our groups, and you're a friend. So thank you again.